Hello BookTube, I'm back for another video. I'm going to be doing a video giving my thoughts on a book that I just read. I just finished it today, and it's the novel Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, the classic novel of gothic romantic horror, sort of, give or take, depending on how you want to define horror. But it's the story of a man, a scientist, who creates a creature, and the creature becomes sentient, and he has to deal with that creature. And it's a terrific novel, and I've read it before. I've read it twice before for a university class. I read the 1818 text, and then I read the 1831 text. So for those of you who are not familiar, this novel comes in two versions. It was originally written by an 18-year-old woman, Mary Shelley, and she wrote this and published it when she was still 18, 19 years old. And then later on, in 1831, she revised it. Not too significantly, but significant enough that it changes some of the feelings and emotions and some of the background story that we get in this novel. The most significant chunk that is changed is the story of Elizabeth, the character of Elizabeth, who is raised with our character Frankenstein. But anyways, Frankenstein here is this is very different from what you're used to when you think of the Frankenstein story. Usually you think of like a crazy mad scientist who creates sort of like this green-like character with like stitching around his head, and he's got the metal thing sticking out of his neck, and he's sort of wearing a suit or whatever, and he doesn't usually talk, but in this novel it's very different. The creature is quite eloquent. He learns to speak, and he learns how to convey himself quite well. Even Dr. Frankenstein is quite impressed by his eloquence, so he thinks that eloquence is hiding a deeper malevolence underneath. But the framing of the story is also different if you're not if you're not familiar with the actual story, if you only know it through that cultural idea of what Frankenstein is, because it's dividing between Dr. Frankenstein and the creatures, and Dr. Frankenstein's creature, because the creature doesn't ever actually get a name, which is significant in its own right. Though in just our culture, we give Frankenstein, we put the name Frankenstein onto the creature. But it's interesting because this novel starts off with letters between a character named Walton and his sister, and it's just from Walton's perspective, and he's giving multiple letters that he's sending out to his sister about his dream of traveling to the north. And he's traveling to the north because he's got grand ambitions about what the North could be, the Arctic North. He wants to get a ship and a crew and sail there and see what he can find. Will he discover some utopic land where the sun never sets? And will he discover the secrets of the compass? And will he discover a shorter ship route that will bring people to the other side of the world? And he has all these ambitions, and so that's what he does. He has a ship that he goes north, and at one point when there's a lot of ice all around, the ice cracks, and it separates a lot of icebergs, and on one of those pieces of ice, he discovers a guy who's half dead, and his team of sleigh dogs are mostly dead, and he saves the man and brings him onto his ship and nurses him back to health. And that character is our title character, Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein. He's not really called Dr. Frankenstein, but he's Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, and and shortly after those letters we get the narrative of the life of Victor Frankenstein as he tells it to Walton, sorry. And Walton writes down the tale from the perspective of Victor Frankenstein. And Victor Frankenstein is a young man from Geneva in Europe, and he grows up, has a really good upbringing from a wealthy background, so he's never without any needs, and he's got a family. And he has a passion for science, and so he goes off to a famous school of science of the day, and he is very studious, and he discovers the secret to the elixir of life, which is what is life? What makes humans or creatures alive? And he discovers what that secret is, and he uses it. He decides to create a creature of his own, and so he ravishes morgues and slaughterhouses too, which is a detail I don't think people make enough. They don't point that out enough. Is that he's not just using human parts here; he's using animal parts here, and he creates an 8-foot tall man-like creature, and he infuses it with life. And the big tragedy of the novel, because this is ultimately a tragic novel, is that he doesn't know that he's never thought anywhere beyond creating life. He never thought what he would do after he created life. And that plays out to be the main thrust of the novel, because he flees as soon as the character is animated with life, or the creature is animated with life. He flees and he hides, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's terrified. And the novel plays out between him and that creature, who remains nameless throughout the novel, even though he's known as Frankenstein in common parlance. But that's the main thrust of the novel. We get the letters with Walton, and then we get the narrative of Victor Frankenstein, and then within the narrative of Victor Frankenstein, then we get a long narrative with the creature when he meets up much later with Victor Frankenstein, and basically tells him the origins of his life, the experiences of his life from as far back as he remembers. And this novel it's honestly quite good. It's a terrific novel, and if you never read it before, it's very well written. The especially the scenes of her writing of nature and scenery is very well done. It's beautifully written, and then also her writing of character traits of people, like when she introduces characters like Clerval, who's a good friend of Victor Frankenstein, or when Victor Frankenstein's father, or not his father, his mother passes away early on, and his experience of grief is very well portrayed. It's very well written, surprisingly well written, though I have read this novel a few times. This is my my second reading of the 1818 text, and I've only read the actual novel proper. I have not read any of the bonus material yet, but I will be going through that. I doubt I'll be making a video about that. I figured I'd make a video only about the novel itself. But anyways, about the novel itself, about what stuck out for me during this read, the main thing for me is the theme of virtue and vice. And I swear that wasn't just because I've been reading this work of philosophy by Alistair MacIntyre, After Virtue. I swear it wasn't because I've been reading that around the same time. But I just noticed that the concept of virtues and vices came up over and over again, not just through Victor Frankenstein, but through the creature. And I'll just warn you now that as I go through my thoughts, I will be giving spoilers. The general overview that I gave previously had no spoilers in it, but this will I'll be giving spoilers going forward, just because I want to chat about the book that I just read. And so here is part of the monologue that the creature gives at the very end of the novel. I think the ending is absolutely terrific. I really did enjoy it. But here's a section that that's included in from the creature's monologue at the very end, where he's giving an account of his tragic life to Walton, the ship or the guy shipping north from the very beginning. And I'll also give you a taste of how beautiful the language is here. "Oh, it is not thus, interrupted the being, yet such must be the impression conveyed to you by what appears to be the purports of my action. Yet I seek not a fellow feeling in my misery. No sympathy may I ever find. When I first sought it, it was the love of virtue, the feelings of happiness and affection with which my whole being overflowed, and I wished to be participated. But now that virtue has become to me a shadow, and that happiness and affection are turned into bitter and loathing despair, and what should I seek for sympathy? I am content to suffer alone while my suffering shall endure. When I die, I am well satisfied with that abhorrence, and opprobrium should load my memory. Once my fancy was soothed with the dream of virtue and of fame and of enjoyment. Once I falsely hoped to meet with beings who, pardoning my outward form, would love me for the excellent qualities which I was capable of bringing forth. I was nourished with high thoughts of honor and devotion, but vice has degraded me beneath the meanest animal." And the whole context there is that throughout the whole novel, the creature is considered extremely ugly. Victor Frankenstein cannot bear to even look his creation, and it gives him deep feelings of revulsion. But the creature doesn't understand this, and the creature despairs of this, and everywhere he goes, he's held in revulsion, and he feels that he doesn't belong in a very deep way, and that is partially because when Victor created the creature, of course, he ran away from the creature because he didn't know what to do, and once he saw this thing that he stitched together coming animate, he didn't know what to do, and because he ran away, the creature was forced to figure everything out on its own, and that's what the creature does. And at the very end there, the creature is lamenting this, where he has deep feelings of love and of hope and of virtue, in fame and enjoyment. He wants, mostly though, is what he wants is love, and he doesn't get that from any kind of parent figure. He's born in this man's body. He's like 8 feet tall, I believe, and he's very ugly in form, especially for Victor Frankenstein. He can't stand his yellow eyes, the yellow eyes of the creature. And also, in added irony, he's got perfect teeth, which further make his smile more grotesque. And it's very interesting too, because for most of the story, we're getting this from Victor Frankenstein's perspective, through his first-person narrative, and Victor Frankenstein is like the definition of an absolute coward. He is very self-pitying the whole time through the novel, ever since he created the creature, and every time the creature does something bad, he feels more despair, because he feels the responsibility on his own head, but not because not because he failed in educating the character, but because he created a character that he believes is inherently evil, despite getting multiple proofs to the contrary. The creature is not inherently evil, but his ugliness certainly suggests that he is. And then for the creature himself, the creature is himself full of strong passions that he cannot control, and that lead to his own tragedy of loneliness and despair, because he's rejected by humans. He reacts very strongly with ultimate revenge and anger, and there's many times where he swears that he's going to revenge all of mankind because a couple of people in a village saw that he was ugly, and tried to fight him and get him to leave the village because they didn't want any of their children to be harmed. Or one of the more remarkable parts of the book is when he's educated by an aristocratic family, but not with that family's knowledge. He's hiding in a room separate to this cottage where this aristocratic family that has experienced a downfall, they now live in the small cottage, and one of the characters in that cottage is teaching this woman that he loves how to speak his language, which in this case is French, though the novel is all original English. So the creature learns how to speak, he learns how to read, he learns how to be very eloquent. And then when he finally has the courage to musters the courage to confront this family, because he's very much been in love with this family, because he sees this family as standing for high virtue, and this family as being the only family he's ever had, even though they don't really know that he exists, other than some few chores that he does for them without them knowing who does it. Like he chops their wood and he shovels their snow. They don't know who does that, but he's the one who does it for them. And but when he finally reveals himself to them, they immediately all recoil in horror, and this makes him so upset that he runs away and swears vengeance on all of mankind, and he's full of that kind of ruling vice of anger and uncontrolled passion, which you could blame either way. You can say that it's because the creature didn't have a proper emotional education, or you can say that the character or the creature should know better, and that he should do more to prove to people that he is in fact not a menace, that he's not a monster figure. But he sort of takes that monster figure that people impose on him and kind of takes it for himself. And part of this is part of what the literature that he's read, like one of the books that Mary Shelley explicitly gives him as part of his education is Paradise Lost by John Milton, and the creature feels very strongly for the character of Satan. And part of the epigraph the epigraph that is included here by Mary Shelley is 3 lines from Paradise Lost, and these are the words here: "Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me?" That's the epigraph that Mary Shelley includes as for this novel, and it's very, very appropriate because this creature did not ask to be made. And when he is made, he has no guidance from his creator whatsoever, because his creator has been a coward and has abdicated his responsibility. And the creature ends up becoming a plague to the life of Victor Frankenstein, where he ends up harming a lot of his family, partially by accident, but then also partially to get back at Victor Frankenstein, because he thinks that this creature, he's an outcast, he's a total outcast, and now he doesn't know how he can ever fit in. His life is fated for despair and misery, and he at first asks Victor Frankenstein to build for him a fellow creature, a woman, that he can. And if this creature is created, he will run off with her and never ever be in contact with man again. And at first Victor Frankenstein agrees to this, but then later on, when he's almost finished this body of this woman creature, he is horrified by what he's doing, because he thinks that if he creates this creature, it'll just be the same thing over again, that this creature will be a menace to him and wreak havoc on the world. And so it's very much a clashing of two people, if you count the creature as a person, where there's so much misunderstanding, but also of a lot of unfairness, that creates the tragedy that is the novel. Because there's many times in this novel where I was thinking, like, if the creature only um, talked to the family that educated him and tried to reason with him, because he can speak their language now. They're just repulsed by his looks because he's 8 feet tall. He looks like he looks extremely menacing. If he could only explain to them that he's not actually harmful, like he's not going to harm anyone, he could easily, I don't know if easily, but he could talk them into showing them that he's harmless. But he doesn't. Instead, he runs away and swears vengeance on all of mankind and lets rage get the best of him. And then so the novel becomes just like this clash of revenge between the creature and Dr. Frankenstein. But most of the time, though, we get the enormous wallowings of self-pity from Victor Frankenstein because he's such a coward. And also, he is so full of self-pity that it's actually very irritating at times. And especially when he is... he does not seem to realize the great harm that he did the creature by abandoning him, his creation at its quote-unquote birth. He doesn't seem to acknowledge that at all, and actually at the very end when we get Victor Frankenstein on his deathbed, he has no self-awareness about that either, where he says, "During these last days I have been occupied in examining my past conduct, nor do I find it blamable. In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature, and was bound towards him, to assure, as far as my power, his happiness and well-being. This was my duty, but there was also another still paramount to that. My duties towards my fellow creatures had greater claims to my attention, because they included a greater proportion of happiness or misery. Urged by this, I refused, and did right in refusing, to create a companion for that first creature." So he acknowledges that he had a duty as creator to this creature, but that duty doesn't seem to go beyond the initial plea to create a fellow companion for his monster. He doesn't seem to think that he's blamable for any of the offense that he caused, because you could very easily see a different scenario in which Victor Frankenstein was prepared for this moment and actually educates the creature and tries to create this creature, which tries to bring up this creature as his own. Like, one of the parallels, of course, is that of having children. If people have children, do they know the responsibility? Are they prepared for the responsibility that comes with that? And sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. And the tragedy, the absolute tragedy that can happen in the life of a child if their family is not ready to raise a child, can be devastating. And that's very much this story, is this creature that was created by someone who's not prepared to deal with the consequences and the outcomes that it came from that. Also, one of the weird things to me was the religious aspect of this book, or the lack thereof. Really, this novel is in the tradition of the Romantics, if you're not familiar. Mary Shelley was married to, or at least was later on married to Percy Shelley. I don't think they were quite married when this novel was written, but she was married to the poet Percy Shelley, the Romantic poet, and they were also close friends with Lord Byron, the most famous of the Romantic poets, and they were big fans of the poetry of Wordsworth and Coleridge. So there's a lot of, that's why I imagine why the nature descriptions are so beautiful in here. But it seems like almost as if Christianity does not exist. I did read to you that that quote in the beginning about vice and virtue, and that has a little bit of religious themes in it, but one of the weird things that Frankenstein does, Victor Frankenstein, is that multiple times he appeals to almost like pagan type spirituality. So let me give you an example here. He does this 3 times, but this is the 3rd time he does it. And this is when he is visiting the tombs of 3 people, of 3 family members of his that were either killed by the creature or that were their death was directly in response to their despair at having a loved one die. So this is so he's visiting their tomb or their graves, and he has experiences deep grief and despair, and this is what he does. I knelt on the grass and kissed the earth, and with quivering lips explained, by the sacred earth on which I kneel, by the shades that wander near me, by the deep and eternal grief that I feel, I swear, and by thee, O night, night here is capital, O night, and by the spirits that preside over thee, I swear to pursue the demon who caused this misery, until he or I shall perish in mortal conflict. For this purpose I will preserve my life, to execute this dear revenge. Will I again behold the earth, and tread the green herbage of earth, which otherwise would vanish from my eyes forever. And I call on you, spirits of the dead, and on you, wandering ministers of vengeance, to aid and conduct me in my work. Let the cursed and hellish monster drink deep of agony. Let him feel the despair that now torments me. And you see that there, this weird calling on the spirits of the dead. And he does that a few times throughout the book, when he's all alone and he's in this area of nature where he's out of a city, or when he's not when he's in a city or anything like that. It's only when he's alone and he's in nature that he makes direct exclamations to nature. And I find that interesting because there's no mention of God, heaven, or hell other than through tangentially saying through like cultural osmosis, like, this is hell, or that hellish creature, or whatever. The only other mention is when Paradise Lost is brought up, and Paradise Lost and Satan and the figure of God are mentioned, but that's it. There's no mention of the Bible or of any kind of priest or Christianity or church, and I found that quite interesting. It is very much on track with the romantic ideal or ideas, so it's not surprising, but it's very interesting to think about. What else did I want to talk about this novel? I guess you could say one of the interesting things about this novel that I find appealing is to draw figures to different other works of literature, roughly from this time period, roughly before, roughly after, that deal with similar figures of the creature, where because the idea of beauty and the idea of the ugly are very strongly present in this novel, so having the beauty of nature, or the beauty of the human form, the beauty of scenery, contrasted with that of the ugliness of the creature, and the ugliness of the creature very much, you get the sense, contributes to Victor Frankenstein's feeling of the villainy of the creature. Like, the creature is as if how you look determines your moral inner qualities, and I get the sense that that's how Victor Frankenstein looks at the creature, even though he's the one who created the creature. And so I was thinking of comparing that to other novels from this time, other novels from novels and short stories from the 19th century. So there is some examples I came across were like The Phantom of the Opera, where you have this guy who with this ugly deformity, and how he feels completely isolated from society, and what that turns him into, and that drives him to create. I've never actually read the novel itself, but I've watched one of the productions, the musical productions of it, and I would like to read the novel. I might read the novel next month. We'll see. But then you got the Notre Dame de Paris from Victor Hugo. You got the figure of Quasimodo there, who's the hunchback, who's not blind, but he's deaf, and he can barely communicate, and he's very much a deformed figure that that other people mistrust because of the deformity, though he is very much a good figure on the inside, and he proves that very well in the novel. So there's lots of literature that look at misshapen figures in this period of time, and they try to explore that and what that means. And other example would be the opposite in the picture of Dorian Gray, where you have a beautiful figure whose ugliness is the ugliness of his actions and his inner moral quality is transposed onto a portrait of his, and then that leads to the tragic ending there. And then an example that you probably wouldn't think about is a short story by Thomas Mann, which was written in like the 1890s. It's called Little Herr Friedemann. Her as in the German equivalent of Mr. So it's Little Mr. Friedemann in complete English there. But the edition I read it in was called Little Herr Friedemann. And it's the story of a man who's dropped as a baby, and that crippled his body, and so he grew up as a hunchback. And he's kind of assimilated into society. Like, people don't consider him revolting and a revolting figure, but they do. But he is isolated in the sense that he can never have love, because no one would ever consider marrying a figure like him because of his deformity. And he's sort of made his peace with that until he falls passionately in love with a new woman who comes into town, and the story ends quite tragically, as you'd imagine. And I just find these kinds of stories very interesting, like especially since one of the key markers of all these characters, except for Quasimodo from Notre Dame de Paris, is that they're all incredibly intelligent. The creature in Frankenstein is very eloquent, and he speaks for himself very well. And Dorian Gray is, of course, very intelligent, and that just furthers his destruction. And you could say the same thing about the Phantom of the Opera. His incredible intelligence, his architectural abilities, combined with his abilities as a opera singer and opera writer, also contribute to his own sense of isolation, and also his own awareness of his isolation. And especially Frankenstein's creature in here despairs at one point of, if he'd never learned how to read or write, or if he'd never had consciousness, that would have lessened his suffering. But it was the coming of consciousness, of becoming conscious, that created his own awareness of his predicament and increased his despair. And he actually wishes that he could have stayed that way and never had a conscious thought. But I've been rambling on for almost half an hour now, so I figured I'll give it a rest. But anyways, I do recommend this novel. It is a terrific read, and let me know what you think of it, if you've read it before or if you're interested in reading it, and I'll leave it there. Thank you, BookTube.